Dawn collects softly in the half-roofed diner, like water finding its level, settling into corners where glass counters hold a film of desert dust fine as powdered bone. Through windows that have learned to filter harshness into something gentler, pale light enters with the patience of something that understands the difference between illumination and intrusion. A radio blinks its sleepy green eye from the corner shelf, steady as a lighthouse, waiting for the world to remember it has voices to share. The air carries the coolness of first hour, when the larger heat is only a rumor whispered by wind through broken corrugated metal. In the kitchen nook, a kettle waits on its coil with the dignity of an old friend. The followers of the apocalypse archivist moves through the morning ritual with precision that comes not from hurry, but from habit, made sacred by repetition. Small actions accumulate into ceremony, kettle filled and set to warm, paper filters rinsed in water that runs clear and cold from a pump someone, somewhere, keeps in good repair. The filters slide open with the soft sigh of good cardboard, settle into a metal funnel whose lip bears a clean dent that speaks of careful use. Things are arranged so they can be found again, because the wasteland is very large and the habit of careful beginnings makes it quieter. A new tape slots into the recorder with the careful attention of someone who knows that stories, once lost, do not always return. The archivist checks the pencil length, changes the battery, tests the levels with a gentle tap against the microphone. On the counter, a map unrolls like a promise of order, its edges soft from handling, its surface marked with pins and penciled notes in a dozen different hands. Red pencil marks where roads return to use, pale blue where water can be reliably had if you know how to ask the ground. The weight of a ceramic mug anchors one corner, a battery the other, holding the territory flat and ready for consultation. On the corkboard above the pass-through window, a small brass token hangs from a tack. No larger than a bottle cap, its surface worn smooth by fingers that have handled it with reverence. A tiny star is etched into its center, 5 points radiating outward like the promise that someone, somewhere, is paying attention to the spaces between the loud moments. The archivist has found 3 such tokens at different way stations, each bearing the same careful star, each carrying a distinct weight that speaks of different hands, different pockets, different ways of being left behind with intention. Beside the token, a note in tidy block letters, each character formed with the patience of someone who understands that handwriting is architecture, that the way you shape words on paper says something about the way you shape presence in the world. 3 short lines and a drawn hat brim, simple and steady as a signature that belongs to no one and everyone at once. The letters are the kind that belong to someone who learned to write among rulers and ledgers, who values clarity over flourish, meaning over decoration. Steam finds the beginning of a voice in the kettle. The archivist hums a 3-note phrase, without meaning to, too close together, one that lingers. The way some people hum lullabies they've never learned, melodies that seem to rise from some deeper place than memory. The sound drifts through the diner like incense, settling into the rhythm of morning, becoming part of the room's quiet breathing. The tune has no proud name. It lives in air as something useful, not something owned. They press record, and the red light blinks to life, patient and steady. The tape begins its turning, ready to receive whatever truth the morning has to offer. Into the hush, the archivist speaks with a voice trained to keep company with facts, a voice that prefers careful edges to bright claims. Archive log, early hour. Diner off the old road, 2 days out from the outpost. we continue the inventory of near appearances, the figure people name when they most need not to be alone. The words settle into the room like small stones in still water. This presence is not thunder crackling with electricity and proclamation, not a savior arriving in dramatic rescue, more like a shoulder appearing at the far edge of a frame, a gloved hand steadying a hinge just long enough to set things right, a hat brim passing in the reflection of a window before the room remembers itself. Folk who tell it later lower their voices without knowing why. Not from fear, not even from awe, but from the softness that comes when a thing is made safe to tell. The archivist glances at the brass token, at the star that catches light and returns it without keeping any for itself. The accounts come from everywhere and nowhere, carried by traders and settlers, by guards who measure nights in the weight of responsibility. They speak of footprints that consult different weights, coat hems that vary by inches that matter, scents that linger like signatures, cedar and clean oil, yes, but also lavender and leather, sage and steel. Too many variations for one person, too many ways of moving through the world. They sip from the mug, setting it down where yesterday's ring aligns with today's base, a small ritual of continuity. If a person is singular, why do their tokens vary with the variation of the world? Why does the same careful kindness arrive wearing different shoulders, different ways of placing feet upon the earth? The kettle settles to stillness with a small sigh. Outside, the light grows stronger but not harsher, climbing the walls with the patience of something that understands morning as process, not event. The desert stretches beyond the windows, vast and patient as the questions that have no simple answers. The archivist reaches for a manila folder marked Caravan Guard, Mojave Outpost, fingers tracing the tab where someone has written in those same careful block letters. Inside waits a testimony that begins with dust and patience, with the particular weight of watching over others in the small hours, when the world narrows to firelight and the sounds that might mean safety. The next account, they say to the turning tape, speaks of a night outside the outpost, when misunderstanding became conversation, when presence at the periphery was enough to remind people of their better selves. A star coin left on a crate, simple as that. Evidence not of mystery, but of method. Not of one guardian angel, but of something more patient, more distributed, more human than legend usually allows. The recorder spools the tape along, keeping time with the morning's gentle progression. Soon, another voice will join this one, carrying the sound of hoof bells and canvas, the low murmur of people learning to give each other time. But for now, the diner holds its breath with the story, listening ahead to what patience might reveal, what careful attention might make visible in the spaces where people need not to be alone. The morning settles deeper into its rhythm as the archivist draws the manila folder closer, fingers tracing the edge where someone has written Caravan Guard, Mojave Outpost, in those same careful block letters that seem to appear wherever patience meets paper. The tape recorder's green eye blinks steadily, ready to receive whatever truth the folder holds. Through the diner's windows, the sun climbs, with the unhurried grace of something that understands morning as process rather than event, casting longer shadows that stretch across the worn linoleum, like fingers reaching toward the next moment in the story. The archivist opens the folder with the reverence reserved for things that have traveled far to arrive at the right moment. Inside, handwritten pages on paper that still holds the faint scent of campfire smoke and canvas. Words pressed into the page with the deliberate weight of someone who understands that testimony requires precision. They clear their throats softly and press play, allowing their voice to carry the cadence of the original speaker, a caravan guard whose account begins with the particular stillness that precedes understanding. Third night out from the Mojave outpost, the archivist reads, their voice taking on the measured rhythm of someone accustomed to long watches and careful observation. The kind of evening that settles on you like dust finding its level. We'd made good time across the flats, Brahmins steady, cargo secure. The sort of run that makes you think the wasteland might be learning patience. Cool air trending toward cold by second watch, stars sharp enough to navigate by. The world narrowed to breath and hoof bells and the comfortable weight of responsibility shared among people who know their work. The tape receives the words with mechanical faithfulness, its small gears turning with the persistence of something built to remember. The archivist pauses to sip from their mug, allowing the rhythm to settle before continuing, their voice finding the groove of the guard's experience. The troubles started small, the way most troubles do. We had water cached by the mile marker sign, one of those pre-war markers that still stands because someone, somewhere, keeps painting over the rust. Another small group drifted in around second watch. 2 lights, low voices, nobody trying anything. Just weary people who thought the cache was unclaimed territory. We were drawn tight. Not angry, just the way you get when calculations don't match and you all need the same thing. Through the diner, morning light continues its patient climb, casting the reading in amber tones that make the account feel both immediate and timeless. The archivist's voice carries the texture of desert wind and long nights, the particular quality that belongs to people who have learned to watch and wait and see patterns in the spaces between events. No alarms, no rattle of weapons being readied. Just a decisive interruption that changed the weight of the air without disturbing its flow. A silhouette leaned from the shadow of the road sign, not stepping forward into the firelight, not announcing itself with words or gesture. Just the straightening of a coat line, the tipping of a hat brim toward the part of the ground where we could all see it if we were inclined to look. One gloved hand raised in slow reassurance, palm down, moving through the air like you do when you hush a nervous animal that's mostly listening already. The archivist pauses here, noting in the margin the phrase slow reassurance, recognizing in it the particular quality that appears in account after account, the gesture that calms without claiming credit for the calming. They resume reading, their voice carrying the weight of the guard's memory. Voices cooled like water poured on embers, not silenced, not intimidated, just reminded of their better selves. The shape didn't speak, just existed at a respectful distance, making it easier for everyone to be their best self. Hard to be foolish when you think someone's watching with you, not at you. We held. We let the second group explain what they thought, and we explained what we had counted on. The morning progresses around the diner, but the space feels suspended in the guard's account, held in the amber of careful attention. The recording captures the small sounds, the settling of wood in morning warmth, the distant hum of electronics, the soft percussion of fingers against paper, weaving them into the fabric of the testimony. We put the lantern between us and opened the map at the seam, shared routes, marked a wash that held after the last rain, traded a filter kit for a patched boot. It turned into one of those nights where the world is a porch and you are neighbors by default, where the argument over the water cache became a conversation about the particular challenges of the season and the wisdom of sharing information that makes everyone safer. The archivist sets down the folder and reaches for the brass token on the corkboard. holding it up to catch the light streaming through the windows. The star etched into its surface seems to pulse with the rhythm of the morning, a small beacon that connects this moment to the guard's account, to all the other accounts waiting in folders and memories. When I looked back toward the road sign, the silhouette was gone, not departed with fanfare or dramatic exit, just absent the way morning is absent from evening, naturally and without announcement. But on the crate where the maps had been spread, beside the still warm lantern, sat a small star coin and a scrap of paper with words written in those same careful block letters. The archivist's voice softens as they read the phrase that has begun to appear like a signature across the wasteland. You were almost alone. Almost. The words settle into the diner like a benediction, simple and profound as the promise that someone, somewhere, is paying attention to the spaces where people need not to face the world entirely by themselves. They pause the tape with a soft click and make 3 careful notes in the margin of a fresh page. The phrase written in quotation marks. The coin sketched as a small circle with radiating lines. The scent described in the guard's account as cedar and rain on metal, clean and patient as morning itself. These details accumulate like evidence of something too large to see all at once, too distributed to capture in a single frame. The map on the counter receives a new pin, red-headed and precise, marking the location outside the Mojave outpost, where presence interrupted potential conflict and transformed it into cooperation. The archivist draws a thin pencil line connecting this new pin to 2 others already placed. One near a red rocket station in the capital Wasteland, another at a Commonwealth farm, where similar accounts speak of quiet intervention and star coins left like signatures in a language everyone can read but no one claims to have written. Pressing play again, the archivist continues with the guard's account. There was also a sound. Didn't clock it till later, when I was rolling up the lantern wick. 3 notes. Not a song, more a tap on the shoulder to see who's awake. Too quick, one that hangs at the end like you wait for an answer. Came from the direction of the sign. Then, I swear, I heard it again faint, somewhere across the road, as if someone set it down for the next person to pick up. The archivist's hand pauses over the logbook, a faint hum of those same 3 notes, the ones they had unconsciously hummed that morning, now resonating with the guard's description. They note the motif with the care of someone cataloguing birdsong, drawing the 3 notes as dots in a small arc, then writing in the margin. Motif appears in Commonwealth report. Check frequencies at hour. We started using it in camp. The guard's accountant continues, not as code, just to say, all right, I'm here. It made the nights less empty. And couple days later, we pulled through a relay station to fill canteens and check the public board. There was a maintenance ledger on a hook. Neat hand. They had a habit of initialing repairs. One entry stood out because it matched our time frame. The latch on the station door had been sticking, set to rights. Initials MS. Next line, chime steadied. Same initials. The archivist leans closer to the recording, sensing the thread that will lead them forward. The guard's voice carries a note of recognition, the particular quality that comes when someone realizes they've been seeing pieces of a larger pattern without knowing it. The lock looked like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times by people in a hurry. This was different. You could hear the bolt set down instead of slam. There's care you can hear. I noticed a dab of clean oil on the hasp. Smelled like cedar shavings, maybe mixed with something that keeps rust thoughtful. It stuck in my head because it didn't smell like the inside of a gun or a garage. It smelled like a workshop where someone makes useful things and tests them until they click. The archivist pauses the tape and turns the map so the light catches the Mojave region without glare. They draw a tiny square at the relay station's location. Then next to it, a miniature hinge sketched in 2 strokes, a personal notation for places where function was restored. The index card receives the letters MS, then a question mark that is more invitation than doubt. The guard's final observation settles into the room like the last note of a song. We figured it doesn't matter if it's a person or a post or a habit, long as we don't need the answer to be good neighbors. The coin's just a reminder that somebody out there cares enough to stand in a place where they're barely seen, so that we remember how to see each other. The recorder clicks to silence. Not an end, but a rest. The archivist labels the reel and places it in the processed stack, then reaches for a fresh envelope with the follower's seal. They begin a careful request for copies from the relay station's ledger, phrased with the small courtesies that ease cooperation, adding a postscript about the latch and whether the oil still smells like cedar. Outside, a shadow moves across the dirt like a bird passing. Inside, the world stays tucked and deliberate. The archivist writes a small heading in soft graphite, ledger script and lock marks. The words make a path into the afternoon, where careful hands and careful eyes will lay quiet evidence side by side until the pattern shows itself without needing to be forced. Competence leaves a trail as precise as tool marks, and patience reveals what haste would miss. The 3-note phrase hums itself softly through the diner's quiet air, and the archivist finds themselves humming along, adding their voice to a melody that seems to belong to everyone and no one. A signal that says, someone is listening, someone cares. You are not alone in the watching. Afternoon light gathers itself with the patience of something that understands its place in the day's larger rhythm, casting pale squares across the archivist's desk that climb the walls like gentle hands marking time's passage. The morning's work sits in neat stacks, the guard's testimony processed and filed, the request for ledger copies sealed and dispatched with the dawn courier, the map dotted with new pins that suggest patterns emerging from what once seemed like scattered coincidence. The radio maintains its quiet vigil from the corner shelf, green eye blinking with mechanical faithfulness, waiting for the world to remember it has more stories to share. A soft knock at the diner's threshold announces the afternoon courier, a weathered woman whose pack bears the careful patches that speak of long miles and conscientious maintenance. She exchanges the archivist's sealed request for a manila envelope thick with photocopied pages. The transaction conducted with the efficient courtesy of people who understand that information moves like water through networks of trust and mutual aid. The courier accepts a cup of coffee, still warm from the morning pot, and a small star coin as payment, tucking the token into her breast pocket with the reverence of someone who recognizes significance without needing to understand its complete meaning. After the courier's footsteps fade into the wasteland's larger silence, the archivist settles at the counter with the new envelope. The paper crackles softly as they ease the copied pages free, each sheet bearing the ghost marks of the copying process, original handwriting translated through light and shadow into something that holds its meaning while transforming its substance. The relay station's maintenance ledger unfolds like a map of small kindnesses, each entry occupying its own line in script that speaks of patience and precision. Stuck latch set to rights. MS. The words sit on the page with the weight of completed tasks, simple and final as the click of a properly adjusted lock. Below it, squeaking hinge steadied. MS. Then, water pump primed, MS. Each line represents a small ceremony of attention paid to the world's mechanical needs, recorded with the methodical care of someone who understands that documentation is itself a form of respect paid to the work. This is not the writing of myth needing to make itself large. This is the writing of a caretaker taking notes, recording the daily liturgy of maintenance that keeps the world turning on its proper axis. The archivist traces the formation of the letters with one finger, noting how the M rises from the baseline with careful angles, then following the curve of the S as it settles into completion. The letters carry their own weight, suggesting hands that have learned to write the same way they have learned to repair things, with economy of motion and precision of intent. Turning through the pages, the archivist notices something that makes them pause and look closer. The handwriting maintains its essential character, the same careful spacing, the same respect for the page, but subtle variations emerge. In some entries, the first stroke of the M leans slightly inward, as if taught by a left-handed instructor. In others, the middle point sits lower, a choice some make to keep the letter from resembling a crown. The S shows similar variations. Sometimes the top loop carries more weight than the bottom. Sometimes the curves suggest different pressures, different ways of holding the pen. The differences are not dramatic enough to suggest entirely different people, but significant enough to indicate more than one hand taught to write in the same careful manner, the way apprentices learn to match their teacher's style while retaining the small signatures of individual attention. The archivist slides a sheet of tracing paper over the ledger copy and maps these variations, arrows for slant, circles for loop tightness, creating a cartography of handwriting that mirrors the larger map on the counter. A memory surfaces, and the archivist rises to consult another folder marked with the Brotherhood of Steel's angular seal. Inside, a scribe's report from the capital Wasteland, written in the precise terminology that military organizations use to transform experience into data. But buried in the technical language, a single line stands out. Observation, post, repaired. Unknown benefactor. The report notes that crucial hinges had been oiled and adjusted, loose panels secured, a water filter replaced with one of superior quality. No signature, no claim of credit, but in the margin, a smaller note. Station ledger shows same initials, MS, beside entry for perimeter bell, retied. Now rings true. The archivist places the Brotherhood report beside the relay station ledger, noting how the two documents speak to each other across the miles and months that separate them. The M in the Brotherhood copy shows that lower middle point. The S displays the weighted bottom curve. The clue is not dramatic, but it holds with the quiet persistence of well-made things. Doors that stick get tended, chimes that wobble get tuned, schedules that drift are made regular. Someone, somewhere, is paying attention to the small failures that precede larger breakdowns, intervening with care that prevents problems rather than solving them after they become crises. The three-note phrase from the guard's account returns to mind as the archivist studies the initials. They hum it unconsciously, two notes close together, one that lingers, while fingers tap the rhythm against worn wood. The tune threads itself between lines of ink and pencil, music and script agreeing in their modesty, their preference for function over recognition. A gentle knock interrupts the afternoon's concentration. Another courier stands in the doorway, this one older, bearing a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with string that carries the patina of many journeys. The archivist signs for the delivery, but their attention is drawn immediately to the package's modest weight and the way it seems to hold more significance than its size suggests. The brown paper unfolds to reveal an old harmonica wrapped in oiled cloth, the metal worn smooth by countless hands, the wooden comb darkened by breath and time. The instrument has been maintained with the same care evident in the ledger entries, not new but respected, a tool that has known long use and careful tending. A small card accompanies it, cut from paper the color of maize, and bearing only a hand-drawn star and a frequency written in those familiar block letters, 98.7, on the hour. No signature, no explanation, just the simple invitation to listen at the appointed time. The archivist checks the radio's clock, 15 minutes until the hour, and carefully tunes the dial to the indicated frequency. The speaker fills with the familiar static of empty bandwidth, white noise that occupies the spaces between signals like snow falling on a field at night. They set the harmonica on the counter beside the brass token, noting how the two objects seem to belong together, despite their different origins. United by the star that appears on both and the sense that they are tools in a larger practice rather than artifacts of individual significance. The ledger pages spread around them tell the same story in different language. Small repairs, careful attention, the quiet architecture of care that holds systems in working order. As the clock approaches the hour, the static begins to shift, organizing itself around a pattern that emerges like dawn breaking over distant hills. Very soft, almost lost in the electronic hiss, the three-note motif appears. Two quick notes followed by one that lingers, the same phrase the guard described, now translated into radio waves and broadcast across the wasteland. The sound feels like a lantern set on a windowsill, not bright enough to illuminate the entire room, but sufficient to mark the presence of someone awake and attentive in the darkness. The archivist finds themselves humming along, their voice joining with the radio signal in harmony that seems to extend beyond the diner's walls, connecting this moment to all the other moments when someone has listened for the signal and found comfort in its patient repetition. The broadcast fades back into static after exactly 60 seconds, leaving the diner filled with the particular silence that follows music. Not empty, but expectant, as if the air itself waits for the next note in a song that has no end, only pauses between movements. The archivist makes careful notes of the frequency and timing, adding them to the growing collection of evidence that points towards something larger than individual action, more systematic than random kindness. The investigation, the us, widens now beyond physical traces to encompass sound, to the comfort of signals hidden in the static that surrounds all human communication. The harmonica sits on the counter like an invitation, its worn surface reflecting afternoon light in ways that suggest it has been played by many hands, carried in many pockets, used to add human breath to the electronic pulse of radio waves. The three-note phrase echoes in memory, connecting the guard's account to the frequency card to the larger pattern of presence that appears at the edges of so many stories. Outside, afternoon progresses toward evening, with unhurried grace. Inside, the archivist prepares to follow the signal deeper into the network of care that spans the wasteland, ready to discover what other messages travel the airwaves in the hours when most people sleep. What other frequencies carry the quiet assurance that someone, somewhere, is listening for those who need not to be alone in the gathering darkness. The radio's hum becomes a kind of company as afternoon light settles into its quieter hours, the static transforming from empty noise into something that feels like presence held in gentle suspension. The harmonica rests beside the brass star coin, both objects catching squares of light that have crept across the counter with the patient progression of shadows marking time. The archivist keeps the dial steady at 98.7, learning the frequency's particular temperament, the way a gardener learns the needs of a specific plant, where it holds clear, where atmospheric pressure makes it drift, how the angle of late sun affects its clarity. On the hour, the pattern returns with the reliability of a lighthouse beam. Two notes close together, then one that lingers like a question asked of the empty air, waiting for an answer that may come from miles away, or from the listener's own understanding. Not music in any formal sense, but something more fundamental. A presence check, a gentle tap on the shoulder of anyone who might be listening to say, someone is awake, someone is watching. The night need not feel as empty as it sometimes does. The archivist makes careful notation of timing and signal strength, their pen moving with the methodical attention of someone who understands that patterns reveal themselves only to patient observation. They tune across the band with deliberate care, discovering that the three-note motif appears on other frequencies as well, sometimes higher in pitch, sometimes lower, but always maintaining that essential rhythm of connection, followed by contemplation. The signals seem to originate from different locations, suggesting not a single transmission, but a network of transmitters, each adding its voice to a conversation that spans the wasteland like a constellation of small stars, each one saying to the others, I am here. You are not alone in the watching. A folder marked Minutemen, Commonwealth Liaison yields another thread in the growing tapestry. The traveling liaison's report carries the practical language of someone accustomed to moving between settlements, translating needs and resources across the spaces that separate communities. But embedded in the administrative details sits an observation that makes the archivist lean closer. Settlers in the Northern Territories have developed a habit of listening for a particular radio signal at dusk. Not emergency broadcast, not weather report, but a three-note sequence they describe as assurance that someone patient is passing by the ridgeline. The liaison continues with measured observation. They gather on porches and rooftops during the evening hour, not to watch for threats, but to listen for what they call the ridge signal. When it comes, two notes close together, one that hangs in the air, they nod to each other and go about their evening routines with what appears to be increased calm. One settler explained, it means someone is keeping watch from higher ground. Someone who sees what we see, but from a place where they can see more. Makes the night feel less like we're the only ones awake in it. The archivist traces this account with growing recognition, noting how the description matches not only the frequency they've been monitoring, but the timing and the particular quality of comfort it provides. They add another pin to the map, marking the Northern Commonwealth Territories, and draw a thin line connecting it to the Mojave Outpost and the capital Wasteland relay station. The pattern that emerges suggests not random occurrence, but deliberate coordination, a network of care maintained across vast distances. A cassette tape labeled Station Attendant, Commonwealth Depot, provides another voice in this quiet chorus. The archivist slots the tape into a player that accepts it with mechanical grace, adjusting the tracking until a voice emerges clear from the background hiss. The station attendant speaks with the particular cadence of someone who has learned to find company in routine, whose work involves long hours of watching for arrivals that may or may not come. We don't get many passengers through here anymore, the voice says, accompanied by the distant sound of wind through empty platforms. Mostly freight, supply runs, the occasional trader who knows the schedules. But the depot stays open because someone has to tend the signals, keep the boards updated, make sure the lights work for whoever might need them. It gets quiet in the small hours, the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if you're the last person awake in the world. The attendant's voice carries warmth as she continues. Then we started hearing the 3 notes on the old PA frequency. Not every night, but regular enough that you could count on it. 2 quick, 1 long, always at the same time, always with the same gentle quality. It felt like someone saying goodnight to the world, like a lighthouse keeper making sure the light still works. The archivist pauses the tape to make notes, but the attendant's next words draw their attention back. There's a child's drawing taped near the ticket window. Came in with a family passing through last spring. Crayon drawing of a hat under a star, simple as that. The little girl who drew it told me it was the nice person who plays the goodnight song. When we hear the 3 notes, the night isn't empty. Someone's keeping watch. The image settles into the archivist's imagination with quiet weight. A child's interpretation of the signal, innocent of larger questions about identity and purpose, focused only on the comfort the sound provides. They sketch a small hat under a star in their notebook margin, recognizing in the simple drawing an echo of the brass token on the corkboard, the same iconography appearing across distances and contexts like a shared language of care. The afternoon progresses with unhurried patience as the archivist logs times and bearings, their pen moving in careful strokes across gridded paper. The pattern that emerges sketches a chain of overlooks and rooftops, transmission points that suggest watchers maintaining contact across the wasteland's vast spaces. Each pin on the map represents not just a location, but a community that has learned to listen for the signal, to find comfort in knowing that someone, somewhere, is paying attention to the spaces between settlements. A soft knock interrupts the work. A trader enters, carrying a small cloth bag that jingles softly with the sound of metal against metal. They approach with careful courtesy, setting the bag down with gentle precision. Found this in a tailor's bin in Freeside, the trader says, opening the bag to reveal fabric scraps, buttons, and small patches. Thought you might be interested, given what folks say you're collecting. Among the scraps, a piece of dark cloth catches the light, a patch of stitching showing a tiny star embroidered inside what appears to be a coat hem. The threadwork so fine it would be invisible unless you knew to look for it. The archivist examines the patch with a magnifying glass, noting the precision of the stitches, the way the star is positioned where only the wearer would know of its existence. The embroidery thread matches the fabric so closely that it appears as texture rather than design, a signature meant not for display but for private recognition. The work speaks of someone who understands that the most important marks are often the ones no one else sees, hidden reminders stitched where habit lives, where the wearer's hand might brush against them in moments when reassurance is needed. The archivist adds this discovery to their notes, another thread connecting the physical evidence of coats and tokens to the radio signals that span the wasteland like an invisible web of care. As evening begins its approach, the radio crackles with increased activity. The 3-note motif appears more frequently, sometimes overlapping, as different transmitters add their voices to the network. The archivist maps these signals with growing understanding, seeing how they favor places with sight lines over routes where people move in small numbers. Benches cut into rock, access ladders, rooftop water tanks. A string of star tokens tying distant places together. Less mystery than practice, less legend than living tradition. At 18 minutes past the hour, something changes. The familiar pattern arrives, but with a subtle alteration. The lingering note holds a fraction shorter, and in the pause that follows, a whispered word emerges from the static, like a leaf carried on a gentle stream. Overlook. The archivist leans closer to the speaker, adjusting the volume to catch the faint transmission. The word is repeated once, soft as breath. Then the frequency returns to its normal pattern. But the invitation is clear. Not a trap, not a test of nerves, but a request for a considerate meeting at the blue hour when day surrenders to night. The place name is one known only to caretakers and scribes, a location that appears in none of the public maps, but exists in the informal geography of those who tend the Wasteland's hidden infrastructure. The archivist checks the time and calculates the journey. There is enough light remaining to make the walk safely, enough time to arrive when the invitation suggests, at that soft hour when edges blur and the world exhales, making it easier to see what truly matters. They gather their notebook, the brass token, and the harmonica, understanding that the investigation has reached a point where observation must give way to participation, where the pattern of care they've been documenting extends an invitation to join its quiet work. The radio continues its patient broadcast as they prepare to leave, the three-note motif threading through the static like a lullaby sung to the approaching night. Outside, the wasteland stretches toward the horizon with the particular beauty of late afternoon light, and somewhere in that vastness, someone is waiting with the patience of those who understand that the most important meetings happen not with fanfare, but with the simple courtesy of showing up when you say you will, ready to listen to what the gathering darkness has to teach. The door closes softly behind them as they step into the cooling air, following a whispered invitation toward an overlook where the night will reveal its secrets, not through dramatic revelation, but through the quiet sharing of those who have learned that the world is tended best by many hands, working in gentle coordination, each adding their small light to the larger constellation of care that keeps the wasteland from feeling quite so empty, quite so alone. The path to the overlook rises through scrub and weathered stone, with the unhurried patience of something that understands evening as process rather than destination. Each step carries the archivist deeper into the blue hour, when day surrenders its harsh certainties to gentler possibilities, the air cooling with particular softness as heat releases its grip on the land. Behind them, the diner's radio signal grows fainter but remains audible, the three-note motif threading through static like a compass needle pointing toward understanding that lives in practice rather than explanation. The overlook reveals itself gradually, not dramatic vista, but a place where land pauses to consider its options, a natural shelf of stone worn smooth by wind and time. Someone has chosen this spot with care, recognizing it as a place where the eye can rest on distant horizons, while the body finds comfort in constructed shelter. Weathered boards form a simple bench, smoothed by use rather than sanding, a rail that knows how to hold a leaning body without complaint. Footprints feather the dust near the edge, overlapping ages and weights into a palimpsest of quiet visits. On the bench, arranged with the precision of a still life, sits a thermos radiating gentle warmth when the archivist's palm hovers near its surface. The metal shows the particular patina of something well-maintained rather than new, dents and scratches speaking of long use rather than careless handling. Beside it, a folded note held in place by another star coin, this one carrying different weight, its brass surface suggesting different pressure in the making. The way two people taught the same letters, write them with small signatures of their own. The archivist settles onto the bench with careful attention of someone entering space that belongs to others. The note unfolds with faint scent that is not cedar this time, but something rounder, clean and floral. Lavender pressed into oiled cloth, perhaps. The kind of smell that says workshop as clearly as any sign. The handwriting resembles the ledger's steady script, but carries its own character. Small lift in the crossbars, deliberate spacing that leaves generous margins around words, as if to avoid crowding the reader. Breathe. You have questions. Help someone nearby with something small. Leave no name. Return if you like. The message continues with measured cadence that transforms inquiry into invitation. The work is not about answers. The work is about presence. You have been present with our traces. Now be present with the world that needs tending. The archivist reads the words twice, allowing their rhythm to settle into understanding. This is not mystery preserved for its own sake, but invitation extended with courtesy of those who understand that important truths are learned through participation rather than explanation. The thermos unscrews with quiet satisfaction of threads well cut, liquid inside still warm, tasting faintly of mint and iron, clean water, and something like memory of tea. Movement catches attention on the switchback road below, a trader's handcart negotiating the turn with particular struggle that speaks of mechanical difficulty. The cart lists slightly to one side, left wheel, describing a wobble that speaks of axle nut working loose or washer that has given up its thin ghost. The trader pauses to examine the wheel with frustrated attention of someone who knows what's wrong but lacks tools to fix it properly. Without conscious decision, the archivist finds themselves descending the path toward the road, jacket pocket containing small toolkit that has become habit to carry, not from expectation of need, but from understanding that problems often present themselves when solutions happen to be nearby. The trader looks up as shadow becomes figure, wariness giving way to cautious hope as the archivist gestures toward the wobbling wheel. Axle pins working loose, the archivist observes, keeping voice low and easy, knees bending to meet the cart where it stands. Probably just needs tightening, maybe a touch of thread locker if you have it. They produce small wrench from kit, adjusting it to fit the nut that holds wheel assembly in place. Between them, they lift the cart side enough to take weight off the complaining wheel. Cotter pin has begun to shear. Washer has thinned to a curl. The archivist's fingers move in confident economy of practice. Back the nut off in quarter turns. Ease wheel clear. Wipe grit from axle with cloth that comes out clean. Add drop of oil from small bottle whose scent is that cedar clean that keeps metal from thinking about rust. The trader provides spare washer from pouch of small usefuls, nodding in the way of people who have been mended before and learn to carry means to mend others as well. They reseat the wheel, tune the tension by feel, not too tight, not too loose. Test the spin and listen to the sound it makes. Whisper rather than rattle now. Nothing heroic, only competence shared like water from a well, without drama, without keeping score. Try it, the archivist says, stepping back. Cart rolls and does not argue. Trader's shoulders release a fraction. Small thing has become smaller, and the road that follows will be measurably easier. What do I call you? The trader asks, tone gentle, curious but not pressing. Doesn't matter, the archivist answers, adding small smile to make sure this feels like permission rather than refusal. Safe travels. They return to the path with cadence of someone who does not wish to take credit for what they simply like to see done. The hill receives them back at pace of gravity and breath. The bench meets them exactly where it was, exactly as it was, except for one difference. Under the thermos, which has held its warmth like kept promise, a second note waits. No flutter of movement to show its arrival, only the fact of its being there now, as if it had always been a second layer. The paper holds same faint lavender-clean scent. Handwriting is again the ledger hand with its slight lift. its generous spacing. But this time words are even fewer, arranged like mantra that knows its own utility. See, steady, step back. The archivist reads the lines twice, the way one tastes water twice to be sure of its source. They trace the periods, small and clear. Quiet insistence that each action is whole in itself. See, not judge, not stir up, not seize. Steady, not fix everything, not command. Step back, not from indifference, but from grace of letting people own their steadiness once found. The open loop remains, gentle hum in the back of understanding. If this is a person, why do the details refuse to narrow into singular identity? The coins carry minute differences in weight and patina, suggesting different makers or different ages. Scent shifts from cedar to lavender to clean oil. Too many variations for one person's consistent signature. Footfalls mentioned in reports consult different weights, different gaits, different ways of moving through the world. Yet consistency lies not in physical details, but in approach. Same gentle attention to small problems, same preference for presence over proclamation, same habit of stepping back when immediate need has been addressed. Perhaps the question itself needs reframing, the archivist realizes. Perhaps mystery is not who the stranger is, but what the stranger represents. Practice rather than person. Role that can be filled by anyone who chooses to see what needs steadying and steps forward with tools and willingness. They turn the coin over in fingers while thinking, letting edge walk around pads of thumb and forefinger. On the back, where other coins carried only quiet star, this one holds line of block letters no larger than grains of rice, cramped lovingly into narrow ring between star and edge. The tailor who knows the measure of ghosts. Free side. Third door past the sign that promises tomorrow. It is not address so much as direction, spoken like story. As if person who wrote it believes in landmarks and relationships more than numbers. The phrasing makes the archivist's breath deepen, the way one breathes when detail both clarifies and widens the picture. The tailor's mention brushes memory held in earlier find. Fabric scrap, hidden star stitched inside coat hem where only wearer would feel it against palm while donning garment. Blue hour deepens, and three-note phrase rises from air again. Not from radio this time, but somewhere just out of sight. Breath of harmonica, or small transmitter hidden in scrub. Two notes close, one that lingers. Sound seems to find trader on switchback below as it finds archivist on bench, brushing both with same assurance. You were almost alone. Almost. They return thermos lid, tighten it until it seals with quiet little affirmations sound well-machined things make, and set it so anyone passing might see. Open circle of use, no sense of ownership. The coins on corkboard at diner, this coin in hand, coin they pressed into courier's pocket. Circulation is the point. Meaning moves. Twilight gathers its indigo shawl over the ridge. The overlook makes no effort to hold them. Places like this refuse to be dramatic about departures. They are built for returns. The archivist takes one last look at the arrangement. Quiet bench, thermos, coins small star watching like sentinel who asks nothing, and rises. On walk down, their steps fall into cadence they've learned to trust. Steady, careful, audible enough to announce intent without startling anyone who listens to ground. Road back to diner receives them the way familiar roads do, by paying them no special mind. In pocket, where archivist keeps coin, warmth leans into metal, and coin returns it, becoming neither cold nor hot, just carried. At counter, under radio's patient green eye, they lay out what came of meeting. Note with first instruction, coin with map hidden in sentence. Second note with three-line rule set, fabric scrap from trader's bag. Pieces align without needing to be forced. Threads know how to find each other when arranged without hurry. They examine fabric again. Dark cloth with fine hand, durable without showing its armor. Inner seam carrying tiny stars stitched in matching thread. Their finger traces embroidery, following each point, feeling how knot sits flush, designed not to rub. Smallness of work is the point. This is not mark laid on for others to see. It is touchstone for wearer, private reminder that coat's use carries purpose beyond weather and dust. Freeside, the archivist says to quiet room, testing word the way one tests key and lock. Not to open door yet, but to feel alignment of teeth and tumblers. Third door, past the sign that promises tomorrow. They can see place in mind's map. Fountain's chipped rim, shadow that falls at noon. Tailors who live along side streets where cloth and story interweave. The investigation widens now beyond physical traces to encompass understanding that threads can tell truth politely, revealing secrets to those who know how to read language of tension and weave, of patterns that speak in spaces between what is visible and what is known. The journey to Freeside will follow tomorrow's light, carrying questions that calm as they clarify, seeking the tailor who knows measure of ghosts and what stories fabric remembers, when stitched by hands that understand the weight of care, made visible only to those who wear it close to the heart. The morning journey to Freeside unfolds with the patient grace of someone who has learned that understanding comes to those who move without urgency. The archivist walks the dusty road with measured steps that match their breathing, the star coin from the overlook resting in their pocket like a small compass pointing toward answers that live in practice rather than theory. Behind them, the diner's radio signal fades but never quite disappears, the three-note motif threading through static like a reassurance carried on desert wind. Freeside receives visitors with the particular mixture of necessity and community that characterizes places where survival has learned to wear a human face. The fountain's chipped rim catches morning light exactly as memory suggested, its broken edge speaking of time and weather rather than neglect. People move with unhurried purpose, traders arranging goods that show the careful patches of things kept useful rather than replaced, children carrying water in containers whose dents tell stories of careful use. The sign that promises tomorrow stands where the coin's inscription predicted, hand-painted letters on weathered board, optimistic without naivety. Past it, the street narrows into comfortable intimacy, where windows stay open because trust has been earned through small kindnesses accumulated over seasons. The third door announces itself not through signage, but through other means. The soft percussion of a sewing machine, maintaining steady rhythm, the scent of clean cloth and oils that keep leather supple. And beneath it all, the sound of humming that carries those same three notes the archivist has learned to recognize. Inside, wind moves like a low song through the narrow corridor. The tailor has cleared between bolts of fabric and the cutting table, where precision happens. The room breathes with the particular atmosphere of a workshop, where competence has settled into routine, cotton and soap scents, mingling with the faint ghost of lavender tucked among garments to discourage insects from confusing necessity with sustenance. Afternoon light filters through windows that prioritize function over clarity, casting the workspace in amber tones that make every surface seem touched by warmth. The tailor finishes a hem with needles skimming fabric's edge in practiced economy, humming those three notes without conscious thought. Too close together, one that lingers like a question asked of the air. The sound passes through the shop like a hand smoothing wrinkles, settling into the room's quiet breathing. When they look up, Their face carries the expression of someone who has been expecting this visit, not through prophecy, but through the patient understanding that questions eventually find their way to those who might hold answers. The tailor says, without preamble, voice carrying warm certainty rather than surprise. They gesture toward a rail where garments rest with the dignity of tools awaiting their purpose. The archivist settles into the chair beside the cutting table, noting how the space arranges itself around function rather than display. The coats hang in sizes that speak to different bodies, different ways of carrying oneself through the world. Some wear patterns that tell stories, elbows polished by pressure against rough surfaces, suggesting nights spent with forearms resting on parapets while watching roads. Right shoulders bearing the shine of straps pressed along many miles. Knees eased and strengthened where someone has knelt often to adjust ground-level latches or comfort children. The tailor continues, returning to their work with hands that move in the careful rhythm of someone who understands that small repairs prevent large breakages. The archivist runs their thumb along a coat's inner seam, feeling for the hidden star. There it rests, stitched with thread so precisely matched that fingertips find the slight bump of the knot before eyes register the design. The embroidery is flush and tidy, designed never to rub or catch, a private touchstone for the wearer rather than a mark for others to see. The tailor explains, needle rising and falling, as conversation itself becomes part of the stitching rhythm. The archivist examines the coat more closely, reading the story of its use in worn places. The cuffs show no fraying. They have been turned twice and hemmed again by someone who prefers repair to replacement. The fabric itself speaks of nights spent watching from high places, days spent kneeling to steady wheels and adjust hinges, the accumulated wear of someone who understands that presence at the periphery can be more valuable than center stage. A small wooden box on the counter draws attention, its contents visible through a partially open lid. The tailor notices their interest and opens it fully, revealing items that wait for their next life with patient dignity. Hats that have been passed back when their usefulness to one person ended. Gloves carefully cleaned and dried. Letters folded small and addressed to no one in particular, each bearing the same message in different handwriting. The tailor explains, fingers sorting through returned items with gentle familiarity. The archivist lifts one of the returned hats, feeling its particular weight and balance. The felt shows gentle shaping that comes from being handled with care rather than carelessness. The band darkened by honest work and time. Inside the crown, barely visible unless you know to look, the same tiny star stitched in matching thread. Tucked behind the sweatband, a small square of paper bears a frequency and the three-note motif drawn as dots. Two close, one spaced, like footsteps keeping company without crowding. The archivist asks, almost to the room itself. The tailor responds with practical simplicity. A customer enters during this exchange, a quiet person whose shoulders carry attention without asking for it. They place a coin on the counter and ask simply. The tailor nods, measures, pins, hums the three notes without thinking, and sends them away with a promise that feels less like transaction than shared responsibility. The afternoon light continues its patient progression as the tailor reaches beneath the counter for an envelope sealed with a paper star pressed flat as a pressed leaf. They say, offering it with the care reserved for tools that will be respected. Inside the envelope, a hand-drawn map on gridded paper reveals vantage points across the wasteland. Not official survey marks, but places chosen by those who understand the difference between seeing and watching. Small circles mark overlooks that can observe without being observed. Arrows indicate gentle, approaches that don't erode soil or alarm animals. Annotations in familiar block letters note practical concerns. Bench needs new slat. Wind stronger from west at dusk. Bring scarf for whoever is with you. Below the map, a single sentence carries the weight of philosophy made practical. The tailor sets something wrapped in oiled cloth on the counter. The unmistakable shape of a hat with a brim that knows how to offer shade without demanding attention. The cloth carries scents of cedar softened by time, of a workshop where tools stay clean and patience stays sharp. They suggest. The archivist rests their hands around the hat without lifting it immediately, feeling its measure. The way objects carry stories of hands that have used them well. When they finally lift it, the felt gives slightly, then supports, as if agreeing to temporary partnership. Inside the sweatband, a small notation confirms what they've begun to understand. The tailor notes, nodding toward the box of returned items. Outside, Freeside continues its daily business, while inside the shop, the archivist holds understanding that has weight without heaviness. The different scents, the varied handwriting, the subtle variations in coins and stitching. These are not exceptions to a rule, but expressions of it. The rule is a posture. The posture is kindness. The kindness is a habit that can be shared without needing names or recognition. The sewing machine resumes its patient rhythm as the archivist prepares to leave, wrapping the hat carefully, sliding the map into their satchel beside other evidence of care made visible. They think of the three-note phrase threading through static, of star coins circulating like small promises, of people who have learned that the world grows quieter and safer when tended by many hands working in gentle coordination. The door closes softly behind them as they step into cooling air, carrying questions that calm as they clarify, understanding that the investigation has led not to a single answer, but to recognition of a practice as distributed and patient as the wasteland itself. Behind them, the tailor's humming continues, adding its voice to the larger song that says, "Someone is listening, someone cares, you are not alone in the watching." The path back toward the diner stretches ahead with the promise of evening's approach, when radio frequencies will carry their quiet signals, and someone, somewhere, will adjust a lamp in a window, steady a loose hinge, or simply stand where they can be almost seen. Guardian angels wearing human faces, keeping watch with the patience of those who understand that the most important work happens not in moments of crisis, but in the careful tending of all the small things that prevent crisis from taking root. The evening journey back to the diner unfolds with the measured cadence of someone carrying understanding that has weight without urgency. The hat rests in the archivist's satchel, wrapped in the tailor's oiled cloth, its presence felt not as burden, but as responsibility temporarily accepted. The wasteland receives the walker with familiar indifference, dust settling in footprints that will be erased by morning wind, leaving no trace except in the memory of ground that has learned to expect passage without demanding explanation. The diner's windows glow with patient amber as evening deepens, the radio's green eye blinking its steady rhythm, like a lighthouse maintaining watch over frequencies that carry more than static. Inside, the space holds the particular warmth of places that serve as waypoints rather than destinations, counters worn smooth by countless elbows, stools that know the weight of many different bodies, air seasoned by coffee and conversations that mattered to someone, somewhere, at some moment that has passed into the larger story of care, shared without keeping score. The archivist settles at the familiar counter and unwraps the hat with ceremonial attention, laying it beside the brass star coin where lamplight can reveal its biography. The felt holds the memory of other weather, old world material that has learned the new world's patience, bearing the small signs of repair with quiet pride. The band has been replaced, then repaired again, each stitch deliberate and unhurried. The crown shows where different hands reshaped it over time, not to change its character, but to renew its function, just enough steam and pressure applied by people who knew when to insist and when to allow. When lifted, the hat releases scents that belong to long nights and patient watching. Cedar mellowed by rain on rusted rails, the clean oil that keeps metal mechanisms thoughtful, leather conditioned by careful hands. Beneath these, fainter notes speak of different wearers, sage and honest sweat, the ghost of campfire smoke, something floral that might be lavender pressed between fabric and time. Each scent adds its voice to the larger story the hat tells about purposes it has served in the quiet architecture of care. Curiosity draws the archivist to examine the hat's interior more closely. Tucked inside the sweatband, almost invisible unless sought deliberately, a fragment of yellowed paper waits with the patience of old things that expect to be found eventually. The edges are foxed and brittle, the ink browned to sepia that tells its own story of survival. The text, faded but legible, carries the dramatic cadence of pre-war entertainment. Tonight, the mysterious stranger walks among us, bringing justice to those who need it most. The fragment continues in smaller print, promising weekly adventures that remind listeners that help can come from the most unexpected places, that someone is always watching over those who have no one to watch over them. Below this, a radio frequency and the sponsor's gentle assurance, because everyone deserves to know they are not alone in the dark. The archivist reads the fragment twice, feeling pieces of understanding settle into new configuration, like sediment finding its natural level. The myth may have been seeded by an old story, entertainment designed to comfort listeners who face their own dark nights, with limited resources and uncertain protection. But somewhere between fiction and practice, the story had been adopted, transformed from passive consumption into active participation. The way children's games become rituals when they serve a purpose beyond play. The way rituals become culture when they answer needs that persist across generations. They place the hat on the wooden peg beside the star coin, where it rests with the dignity of tools awaiting their next use. The arrangement feels right. Not display, but availability. Not monument, but invitation. The hat can wait there like a small promise, ready for whoever might need to understand the work without needing to be seen doing it. The case files spread across the counter receive new attention as the archivist revisits them with this reframing. Evidence that once suggested a single person moving through the wasteland now reveals itself as documentation of something more systematic. A person becomes a pattern when their actions inspire imitation. A pattern becomes a culture when it spreads through communities, like water finding its level. A culture becomes a quiet current that flows beneath the surface of wasteland life, visible to those who know how to look, but invisible to those who expect drama to announce itself with fanfare. The phrase, "you were almost alone," appears in different scripts across regions, each hand adding its own gentle character to the shared message. In the capital Wasteland, letters lean slightly forward, as if written by someone who wanted to leave comfort but needed to keep moving. In the Commonwealth, rounder script gives each letter space to breathe, suggesting time for careful penmanship. In the Mojave, compressed writing speaks of paper conservation, but the message remains unchanged. Reassurance offered without expectation of recognition or gratitude. The calm twist becomes almost visible now, like dawn gathering at the horizon. Not dramatic revelation, but gradual understanding, that transforms the landscape without changing its essential features. The different scents, the varied handwriting, the subtle variations in coins and timing. These are not exceptions to a rule, but expressions of it. The rule is not a person, but a posture. The posture is kindness. The kindness is a habit that can be shared without being diminished, taught without being claimed, passed forward without being possessed. A soft knock at the diner's threshold interrupts the contemplation. The evening courier enters, carrying a manila envelope marked with official seals, the kind of correspondence that usually contains bureaucratic necessities rather than revelations. But inside, wrapped in archival tissue that speaks of careful preservation, lies a single ledger page that refuses to fit the tidy chronology the archivist has been constructing. The page bears familiar maintenance entries. Stuck latch set to rights. MS. Chime adjusted to ring true. MS. But the date stamp makes them pause and read again. The entries are dated 3 days before the Great War's final exchange, recorded in the same careful hand that appears in post-war ledgers, written with the same methodical attention to small repairs that prevent larger failures. The paper itself shows the particular aging of survival, yellowed but not brittle, ink faded but still legible. More significant than age is the consistency, the same formation of letters, the same spacing, the same preference for brevity that characterizes entries found across the wasteland in places that didn't exist when this page was written. Perhaps the initials themselves are ritual rather than signature, the archivist realizes. Perhaps MS has always been a mask worn to keep the face safely unimportant, a way of signing work that needs doing without claiming credit that might complicate the doing. The practice could be older than the bombs, older than the fiction that gave it a name, as old as the human understanding that someone needs to tend the small things that keep larger systems functioning. They place the pre-war ledger page beside the hat and star coin, creating a bridge between two eras united by the quiet dignity of anonymous service. The radio crackles with evening's increased activity as frequencies come alive with voices checking in across the wasteland's vast distances. Among the chatter, the 3-note motif appears with gentle persistence, too close together, one that lingers like a question asked of the gathering darkness. The investigation has led not to a single answer, but to recognition of something more valuable. A way of being present in the world that transcends individual identity, a tradition of care that has learned to wear many faces while maintaining its essential character. The mysterious stranger is not one person, but a role, not a legend, but a practice, not a mystery, but a method that has learned to use anonymity as protection rather than concealment. Outside, night settles with the patience of something that knows it will be followed by dawn. The hat rests on its peg beside the star coin, waiting for the next person who needs to understand the work without needing to be recognized for doing it. The archivist makes final notes in their logbook, words that capture understanding without forcing it into premature conclusions. Practice precedes person. Role outlives individual. Culture carries forward what serves. Tomorrow will bring new evidence, new voices, new stories of presence at the periphery. But tonight brings the comfort of knowing that the pattern continues, carried forward by hands that understand the weight of care made visible only to those who need to see it, felt only by those who need to feel less alone in the vast spaces where someone, somewhere, is always keeping watch. The radio maintains its patient broadcast as the archivist prepares for the next phase of investigation. The 3-note motif threading through static like a lullaby sung to the approaching night. The revelation sits quietly in the room, not shock but recognition, not ending, but beginning, not mystery solved, but practice understood, and ready to be shared with anyone who has learned that the most important work happens not when everyone is watching, but when no one needs to watch, when care flows like water finding its level, reaching places where it is needed most. The evening settles around the diner, with the particular patience of something that understands rest as earned rather than given. The hat maintains its quiet vigil on the wooden peg. The star coin catches lamplight without keeping any for itself, and the pre-war ledger page waits beneath its protective sleeve like a bridge between worlds. The radio's green eye blinks with mechanical faithfulness, maintaining its watch over frequencies that carry more than static across the wasteland's vast distances. From beneath the counter, the archivist draws a shallow archival box that holds equipment reserved for handling things that remember a world before this one. Inside, wrapped in anti-static cloth, rests a holotape whose clouded casing bears a label written in the careful script of someone who believed neatness was a form of respect paid to future listeners. The player itself prefers patience over speed, its mechanisms worn smooth by decades of faithful service to voices that might otherwise be lost to time's larger silence. The archivist threads the fragile tape into position with the gentle attention of someone who understands that old things break easily when handled with ambition rather than reverence. A lint-free cloth passes over contacts that have learned to accept the desert as an inevitable partner. Cotton swabs, lightly oiled, convince reluctant capstans to turn without complaint. The tracking requires adjustment, small movements of dials that respond to touch rather than force. The way old equipment teaches patience to those who would hear its stories. When the play button yields to gentle pressure, the machine rewards careful preparation with steady motion rather than protest. The room receives the warm grain of pre-war audio, like sunlight through aged glass, imperfect but human, carrying the small inconsistencies that remind listeners they are hearing something that was once alive in a studio somewhere, performed by people who have since rejoined the larger quiet. A voice emerges from the static with the practiced cadence of radio drama, half earnest and half charming, in the way of entertainment that knew its purpose was comfort rather than challenge. Tonight, when shadows grow long and the world seems too large for one person to navigate alone, the speaker's tone carries particular warmth, the voice of someone who has learned to make sound a refuge, for listeners who tune in, not for excitement, but for the reassurance that someone, somewhere, understands what it means to feel small in a vast world. The familiar three-note musical sting follows, two notes close together, one that lingers like a question asked of the gathering darkness. Then the announcer continues with gentle authority. The mysterious stranger walks among us, bringing aid to those who need it most. A shadow at the edge of vision, a helping hand when hope seems distant, a reminder that you are never as alone as you think. The promise carries weight without demanding belief, invitation without insistence, comfort without condescension. The archivist leans closer, understanding that they are hearing not entertainment but archaeology, the excavation of an idea that survived the bombs, because it served a need deeper than the civilization that created it. This is not evidence of a single life lived impossibly long across centuries. This is evidence of a meme with dignity, an idea passed and softened by decades like a stone worn smooth by careful hands, shaped by each person who carried it forward into something more useful, more human than its original form. The advertisement concludes with sponsor credits that speak of a world confident in its tomorrow. Brought to you by Nuka-Cola, because every adventure deserves refreshment. The innocence of these promises makes the present moment feel both tragic and hopeful. Tragic for what was lost, hopeful for what survived and adapted to serve new needs in changed circumstances. As the holotape continues, other voices join the investigation through documents that have accumulated like sediment around the central mystery. A Brotherhood scribe's memoir, written in careful script, describes an older scribe who would set coffee at windows during the small hours. "It takes more than walls to make people safe," she would say, while brewing enough for 2 cups. One for herself, one for whoever might pass and need warmth more than questions about their business. The memoir continues with measured observation. She never called it the stranger's work, but she hummed those 3 notes while she prepared the extra cup, and she left small tokens beside it. Sometimes a star-shaped cookie, sometimes just a note that said, "For whoever needs this." When I asked why she did it, she said someone had done the same for her when she was young, and walking alone through territory that felt too big for her courage. "The work finds its own hands," she told me. "You just have to be willing to let your hands be found." A Minutemen captain's report adds another thread to the pattern, describing an unofficial watch rotation called the Stargazers, volunteers who wore plain coats and carried no official insignia, who walked perimeters not marked on any map, and left star coins at checkpoints to remind young patrols to look up from their boots and see the larger world. They never reported to Central Command, the captain notes, but somehow they always knew when new recruits were struggling with responsibility's weight, when someone needed a quiet word or shared meal that came with no questions attached. The report continues. "I asked one of them how they coordinated without official channels. She laughed and said they didn't coordinate, they just paid attention. When you see someone who needs steadying," she said, "you steady them. When you see someone who needs watching over, you watch. The work teaches you how to do it if you're willing to learn." The archivist draws these strands together without forcing them, the way a weaver lets pattern emerge from patient work rather than imposing design through will. Each account adds texture to understanding that has been growing throughout the investigation. Not mystery, but method. Not legend, but living practice. Not one person, but one posture that can be adopted by anyone who chooses to see what needs tending. The holotape reaches its conclusion with the same 3-note phrase, but now the sound carries different weight. Less theme than call to breathe. Less entertainment than invitation. The announcer's final words settle into the room like benediction. Remember that kindness multiplies when shared. That watching over others is how we watch over ourselves. And that the stranger you help today may be the one who helps you tomorrow. The player clicks to silence, leaving the diner filled with the particular quiet that follows meaningful sound. Not empty, but expectant, as if the air itself holds echoes of promises kept across decades. The archivist makes careful notes about the broadcast's date and sponsor information, recognizing in the commercial cheerfulness a world that believed in its own continuity, that could not imagine the silence that would follow its ending. A soft scraping at the threshold draws attention to where an envelope has been slid beneath the frame with quiet precision. The paper bears no postmark, only the archivist's name, written in familiar block letters, and sealed with a paper star pressed flat as a pressed flower. Inside, a single sheet carries a message that feels like natural conclusion to the morning's revelations. If you want the answer you think you want, come at dusk to the place where roads meet and part again. If you want the answer you may rest with, bring your map, and prepare to understand that some mysteries are solved not by finding the person behind them, but by becoming the person who carries them forward. The letter continues with practical details. The broadcast you heard was preserved because someone thought it worth preserving. The practices you have documented continue because someone thinks they are worth continuing. The choice now is whether you will be someone who observes the work or someone who joins it. Both choices have dignity. Only one has the weight of participation. The archivist folds the letter carefully and places it beside the hat and star coin, creating a small shrine to understanding earned through patience rather than demanded through urgency. The investigation has led not to singular revelation, but to series of recognitions, each building upon the last until the larger pattern becomes visible, not through dramatic unveiling, but through slow accumulation of evidence pointing toward truth, too distributed to be contained in any single story. Outside, evening progresses toward its meeting with night, stars beginning their patient emergence in darkening sky. The radio maintains its quiet broadcast, frequencies carrying voices across distances that might otherwise feel insurmountable. Somewhere in that electronic web, the three-note motif continues its circulation, connecting listeners who may never meet but who share understanding that someone, somewhere, is paying attention to spaces where people need not feel entirely alone. The holotape rests in its case, having delivered its message across decades of careful preservation. The voices it carried have rejoined the larger silence, but their words continue working in the world through hands that have learned to carry forward what serves, to release what has completed its purpose, and to trust that the work will find its own hands in each generation that chooses to be found by it. Tomorrow will bring the final meeting, where answers will be offered not as conclusions, but as invitations, not as endings, but as beginnings for those ready to understand that the most important work happens not when everyone is watching, but when someone needs watching over, and there happens to be someone nearby who knows how to watch with patience, how to steady without controlling, how to step back when immediate need has been met. Dusk lifts from the land like steam rising from cooling earth, carrying the day's accumulated warmth into air that tastes of approaching night and distant rain. The archivist follows the familiar path toward the overlook, with steps that match their breathing, the letter's invitation resting in their pocket, not as burden, but as recognition that some meetings happen through the quiet convergence of readiness and need. Behind them, the diner's radio signal threads through static like a compass needle, pointing toward understanding that lives in practice rather than theory. The overlook reveals itself gradually through gathering shadows. Not dramatic vista, but practical vantage where the eye can rest on distant horizons, while the body feigns comfort in constructed shelter. The low wall of stone and lichen emerges from twilight, like a promise kept across time, its surfaces worn smooth by wind and the pressure of bodies that have learned to wait without urgency. Someone has chosen this place with the same care evident in all the other traces, recognizing it as a spot where presence can be maintained without announcement. Against the wall, a leather satchel waits with the dignity of tools arranged for their next use. The as placement speaks of someone who expects it to be found by the right person at the right time, positioned where evening light will catch its brass buckles without creating glare, where gentle breezes will not disturb its careful arrangement. The leather shows the particular patina of things well maintained rather than new, bearing small scars that speak of honest use rather than careless handling. The archivist settles beside the satchel, with reverence reserved for moments that feel ceremonial without announcing themselves as such. The buckles yield to gentle pressure, revealing contents arranged with methodical attention that transforms organization into courtesy paid to future need. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth that carries scents of cedar and rain on metal, objects wait like tools in a workshop where competence has settled into routine. A ledger bound in covers that have learned the desert's patience contains entries written in multiple hands but unified by consistent approach. Each page documents the same quiet liturgy. Water pump primed. MS. Hinge oiled. MS. Loose board steadied. MS. The handwriting varies. Some entries lean forward with urgency gently controlled. Others spread across the page with time for careful formation. But the method remains constant. Small repairs recorded without flourish. Maintenance performed without expectation of recognition. Care documented as matter of course rather than exceptional service. Beside the ledger, a small sewing kit rests in a wooden box, whose corners show the gentle rounding that comes from being handled with affection. Inside, spools of thread in colors that match common fabric, needles sorted by size and purpose, and small scissors whose blades meet with precision that speaks of careful maintenance. Most significant is a spool of thread that matches the star embroidery found in coat hems. Not special material, but common thread used with special attention. The difference between ordinary and meaningful lying not in substance, but in application. The harmonica waits wrapped in familiar oiled cloth, its metal worn smooth by countless hands, its wooden comb darkened by breath and time. When lifted, it releases scents that have become signature without claiming ownership. Cedar and clean oil, the ghost of lavender pressed between fabric and memory. Something floral that might be sage, gathered from high places where wind carries stories between distant settlements. A letter, folded with care, and bearing the paper star that has become signature without claiming ownership, contains words that speak in plural rather than singular voice. The archivist unfolds it with gentle attention, recognizing in the handwriting another variation on the familiar theme. Block letters formed with patience, spacing that gives each word room to breathe, ink that has been allowed to dry properly before folding. We were taught to stand near, to use presence like a lamp. The letter begins, its tone carrying the matter-of-fact quality of practical instruction rather than mystical revelation. We mend what we can. We do not seek names. We leave notes so that one person's good habit becomes a road others can walk. It is not confession requiring forgiveness, but sharing of method, the way a gardener might explain how to tend a particular kind of flower. Practical knowledge offered to anyone with patience to receive it, and wisdom to apply it without forcing results. The words continue with methodical explanation that transforms mystery into method. The work began before the bombs, when someone noticed that small repairs prevent large failures, that presence at the periphery can be more valuable than center stage. It continued after the bombs because the need continued, because people still required steadying, because someone still needed to tend the small things that keep larger systems functioning. The letter explains without claiming credit, shares without seeking recognition. We are not organization in any formal sense. We are habit made visible, practice given form. Some of us learned from others who learned from others, the way skills pass between generations. Some of us discovered the work independently, drawn to it by temperament that prefers function over recognition. All of us understand that the work is larger than any individual who performs it. The archivist tests the harmonica with gentle breath, producing the familiar three-note phrase, too close together, one that lingers like question asked of the gathering darkness. The sound drifts across the overlook and finds answer from a far ridge, softened by distance but clear. A pause, then another response, fainter from the east, as if someone on a rooftop has lifted their face to the wind and offered reply with unhurried care. Presence checks echo across the wasteland like evening bells, a quiet chorus that says, "Someone is awake, someone is watching." The night need not feel as empty as it sometimes does. For a breath, the archivist wonders if anyone will step out from the shrubs, if the evening will resolve into dramatic meeting between seeker and sought. No one appears, and somehow this feels right, more appropriate to the pattern that has emerged throughout the investigation. The work prefers anonymity, not from shame, but from understanding that recognition can complicate service, that stepping forward into light sometimes means stepping back from usefulness. The open loop that began the investigation narrows not to singular answer, but to comfort that feels more valuable than solution. The mysterious stranger is custody more than character, role maintained so that someone, somewhere, is always almost there when presence is needed. Not one person bearing impossible responsibility, but many people sharing sustainable practice, each contributing what they can when they can, trusting that others will fill gaps when duty calls them elsewhere. The harmonica receives careful wrapping and returns to the satchel alongside the ledger and sewing kit. These tools will continue their circulation, finding hands that need them, serving purposes that require no signature beyond the quality of work performed. The hat remains on its peg at the diner, available to whoever might need to understand the work without needing to be seen doing it. The evening progresses with unhurried grace as the archivist prepares to return, carrying understanding that has weight without heaviness. The investigation will continue, but its nature has changed from seeking answers to documenting practice, from solving mystery to sharing method. Tomorrow will bring the final phase, laying out the full map and tracing the continuity of care that flows beneath the surface of wasteland life like underground stream, nourishing communities that may never know its source but benefit from its patient circulation. The path back stretches ahead with promise of completion that feels like beginning, recognition that the most important discoveries are not destinations but directions, not conclusions, but invitations to join work that has learned to use many hands, wear many faces, and carry forward what serves while releasing what has completed its purpose. The radio's signal grows stronger as distance to the diner decreases, the three-note motif threading through static like lullaby sung to the approaching night, assurance that someone is listening, someone cares, and the work continues in hands that have learned to hold it lightly while carrying it faithfully toward whatever tomorrow might require. The return journey to the diner unfolds with the measured cadence of someone carrying understanding that has transformed from question into quiet recognition. Night settles around the path with familiar patience, stars emerging in their appointed places, like small lamps lit by hands that know the value of reliable light. The satchel's contents rest against the archivist's hip with comfortable weight, no longer mysterious artifacts, but tools that belong to a larger practice, evidence of work that continues whether witnessed or not. The diner's windows cast their amber glow across the dusty road, patient beacon in the gathering darkness. Inside, the radio maintains its gentle vigil, green eye blinking with mechanical faithfulness, while frequencies carry voices across distances that connect rather than separate. The hat waits on its wooden peg beside the star coin, both objects holding their quiet dignity, like tools that understand their purpose without needing to announce it. The archivist spreads the accumulated map across the counter, its surface now dense with pins and penciled annotations that tell stories of care distributed across the wasteland like constellations of patient light. By lamplight, the map transforms from simple navigation aid into something more profound, a quilt of connection, each marked location representing not just geographic coordinates, but moments when someone chose to see what needed steadying and stepped forward with tools and willingness. The pins tell their stories in colors that speak of different kinds of attention. Red marks indicate high perches that can observe paths without being observed, water towers with access ladders kept in repair, billboard platforms where someone has left folding chairs and clean blankets, radio relay stations where maintenance logs show initials that match no official personnel roster. Blue pins mark places where infrastructure has been quietly improved. Benches added to overlook difficult trails. Handholds carved into steep sections where elderly traders might struggle. Small shelters positioned where weather patterns suggest they will be most needed. Yellow pins reveal interventions so subtle they might be missed by anyone not looking for patterns of care. A stubborn latch on a clinic door replaced without invoice, payment left in exact change with no name attached. A child's drawing returned to worried parents after being lost during a caravan stop, found pinned to a message board with notes saying only, "Belong to someone who missed it." Water filters replaced in community wells, old ones left with instructions for cleaning and reuse. The archivist adds new annotations in small, calm script, each note a recognition of pattern made visible through patient accumulation of evidence. Their handwriting develops its own character while maintaining the clarity that marks all the best record keeping, personal enough to carry warmth, impersonal enough to serve function. The pen moves with deliberate care, forming letters that will remain legible to whoever might need to consult this documentation in seasons yet to come. At the map's edges, faded notes from earlier investigations reveal how the pattern extends beyond any single region. Capital Wasteland reports echo Mojave accounts, which mirror Commonwealth observations. Different places, different climates, different challenges, but similar gestures of care applied with consistent method. The same 3 rules appear in a dozen different hands, written on scraps of paper tucked into maintenance logs, carved into wooden benches, embroidered inside coat hems where only the wearer will feel them. A vault doctor's report, filed with bureaucratic precision but carrying undertones of wonder, describes an emergency where equipment failure threatened to compromise a critical procedure. An unfamiliar gloved hand appeared at the edge of my peripheral vision. The report states with clinical language that cannot quite contain its amazement. The hand steadied the gurney wheel that had been wobbling, adjusted the IV stand that had been listing, then withdrew without seeking acknowledgement. By the time I looked up from my patient, whoever had provided assistance was gone. The equipment functioned flawlessly for the remainder of the procedure. From Goodneighbor, a barkeep's account arrives through audio recording that captures the ambient sound of her establishment. Glasses clinking, low conversation, the comfortable noise of people finding company in shared space. Had 2 customers getting heated over some trade dispute. Her voice explains with weary patience of someone who has mediated countless arguments. Nothing dangerous, just the kind of thing that can escalate if nobody helps it cool down. I was reaching for the bottle to suggest they settle it with a drink when I noticed a coat sleeve in my periphery. Someone leaning against the bar, not close enough to eavesdrop but near enough to be present. The recording continues with quiet amazement. New coaster appeared between their glasses. Good quality, the kind that absorbs moisture properly. Both men looked at it, looked at each other, and something about the gesture just took the heat out of the moment. They finished their drinks, shook hands, went their separate ways. When I looked for whoever left the coaster, they were gone. But the tone had cooled like water poured on embers, and that's what mattered. The pattern emerges not through dramatic revelation, but through gentle accumulation of understanding. The archivist traces lines of connection across the map and sees not conspiracy but culture, not mystery but method that has learned to replicate itself through example rather than instruction. The evidence points towards something both simpler and more profound than either secret society or supernatural intervention, a distributed network of care maintained by individuals who understand that small interventions prevent large crises, that presence at the periphery can be more valuable than center stage. The different scents noted in various accounts, cedar and lavender, clean oil and sage, no longer suggest inconsistency but variety within unity. The varied handwriting in maintenance logs speaks not of deception, but of a practice that has learned to spread through communities, like water finding its level, reaching places where it is needed without requiring central coordination or official recognition. The subtle variations in star coins tell of different makers, different ages, different hands that have learned to continue work that began before they arrived and will continue after they move on. A Minutemen captain's report details how damaged fence lines appeared repaired overnight across multiple settlements, tools left cleaned and neatly stacked, star coins tucked under top rails like signatures that claim no credit. A Brotherhood scribe describes observation posts that maintain themselves, hinges oiled, equipment calibrated, logbooks updated in handwriting that matched no personnel files, but showed consistent care for detail and function. The accumulated evidence transforms understanding without requiring dramatic shift in worldview. The mysterious stranger is revealed as practice rather than person, role rather than individual, tradition maintained by anyone who chooses to embrace its quiet tenets. It is culture of nearness that moves through the wasteland like groundwater, unseen until it surfaces as assistance, then hidden again as it continues its patient circulation. The archivist sets down their pen and considers the choice that has been building throughout the investigation. The documentation is complete enough to serve its purpose. Future researchers will be able to trace the pattern, understand the method, recognize the signs of this quiet current that flows beneath the surface of wasteland life. The work of chronicling could continue from this counter, adding new accounts as they arrive, maintaining the archive that preserves understanding for whoever might need it. But the hat waits on its peg, with patient invitation, and the map shows routes that could be walked, vantage points that could be maintained, small repairs that could be performed by hands that have learned the weight of tools and the value of stepping back when immediate need is met. The choice presents itself not as dramatic crossroads, but as natural progression, to remain observer or become participant, to document the work or join it, to understand the practice or embody it. Either choice belongs to the same larger practice, the same patient tending of the world's small needs. The work is large enough to accommodate different approaches, different temperaments, different ways of contributing to the quiet architecture of care that keeps communities functioning and individuals from feeling entirely alone in the vast spaces between settlements. The radio's three-note motif arrives on the hour, gentle reminder that the network continues its patient circulation. The archivist hums along softly, two notes close together, one that lingers like a question asked of the gathering darkness. Outside, night deepens with promise of tomorrow's possibilities, and somewhere in the electronic web of frequencies, voices maintain their quiet watch over spaces where care is needed. The map waits under lamplight, its pins and annotations telling stories of presence that transforms absence into company, of work that continues in hands that have learned to hold it lightly while carrying it faithfully toward whatever need might arise. The hat casts its small shadow on the counter, patient as all tools that understand their purpose, ready for whoever might need to learn that the most important work happens not when everyone is watching, but when someone needs watching over, and there happens to be someone nearby who knows how to watch with patience, how to steady without controlling, how to step back when immediate need has been addressed and the larger work continues in other hands. The choice approaches not as ending, but as beginning, not as conclusion, but as invitation to join practice that has learned to use many faces, wear many coats, and carry forward what serves while releasing what has completed its purpose. The investigation has led not to a single answer, but to recognition of something more valuable, a way of being present in the world that transcends individual identity, a tradition of care that honors both helper and helped, that recognizes dignity in both giving and receiving, the small assistances that make survival more than mere endurance. The evening settles around the diner with the particular patience of something that understands conclusions as doorways rather than walls. Night deepens beyond the windows while inside. The accumulated evidence of the investigation rests under lamplight, like pieces of a puzzle that has revealed its picture not through dramatic assembly, but through gentle recognition of what was always present, waiting for eyes patient enough to see the pattern emerging from careful attention to small details. The archivist threads fresh tape into the recorder with ceremonial precision, each movement deliberate and unhurried. The way one handles tools that have earned respect through faithful service. The machine accepts the tape with mechanical grace, its small gears settling into familiar rhythm while the counter resets to zero, not ending, but return to readiness, prepared to receive whatever truth the evening has gathered through patient accumulation of understanding. The red recording light blinks to life, steady as a lighthouse maintaining watch over frequencies that carry more than static across the wasteland's vast distances. The room breathes with quiet anticipation, the hat resting on its wooden peg, the star coin catching amber glow without keeping any for itself, the satchel within reach holding tools that have transformed from mysterious artifacts into familiar companions in the work of care made visible. The archivist begins, their voice carrying the cadence of someone who has learned to deliver important news like a lullaby rather than a drumbeat, soft enough to comfort, clear enough to be understood, measured enough to allow listeners time to receive what is being offered without feeling overwhelmed by its implications. The revelation unfolds without fanfare, understanding offered rather than proclaimed, comfort shared rather than mystery preserved for its own sake. The archivist lifts the harmonica from the satchel, its metal surface worn smooth by countless hands, its wooden comb darkened by breath and patient watching. They set the harmonica beside the star coin, creating a small constellation of tools that speak the same language of care, made visible only to those who need to see it. The hat receives gentle attention as the archivist describes its significance with particular warmth. The map spread across the counter becomes a testament to distributed care as the archivist traces connections that reveal pattern rather than coincidence. They continue, voice softening, with the recognition of truth that serves rather than burdens. The question that emerges carries its own gentle weight, spoken to the room as much as to the recording. The answer arrives with quiet certainty of truth patiently uncovered. They describe the 3 rules that appear in account after account, written in different hands but expressing consistent understanding. The archivist pauses, allowing the room's patient breathing to become part of the record. The radio's gentle hum, the soft percussion of settling wood, the distant whisper of wind through gaps that someone has learned to repair without claiming credit for the repair. They place the hat gently back on its peg, its shadow falling across the star coin like a benediction. The 3-note motif drifts from the radio on the hour, gentle reminder that the network continues its patient circulation. The archivist hums along softly, adding their voice to the larger song that says, "Someone is listening, someone cares. You are not alone in the watching." They conclude, voice carrying promise rather than proclamation. The recorder captures one final moment of the room's gentle breathing before the archivist reaches for the stop button. Outside, night carries its usual distances without feeling quite so empty. Inside, the tools of a small tradition rest where they can be found again, ready for whoever might need to learn that the most important work happens not when everyone is watching, but when someone needs watching over. And there happens to be someone nearby who knows how to watch with patience, how to steady without controlling, how to step back when immediate need has been addressed and the larger work continues in other hands. The revelation rests in the room, like understanding earned rather than mystery solved, transformation that makes the legend more human rather than less meaningful, practice that anyone might join simply by choosing to see what needs steadying and stepping forward with whatever tools they happen to carry. Tomorrow will bring the daily routines that keep this quiet tradition alive, carried forward by hands that have learned to hold it lightly, while bearing it faithfully toward whatever need might arise in the patient spaces where care circulates like groundwater, unseen until it surfaces as assistance, then hidden again as it continues its essential work. Morning does not arrive so much as it is tended into being, drawn from darkness by hands that have learned the difference between observation and participation. The archivist rises to meet dawn with movements that carry new weight, not burden, but responsibility willingly accepted. The way one takes up tools that have been waiting for hands ready to use them well. The hat rests on its peg with patient dignity. The star coin catches early light without keeping any for itself, and the accumulated understanding of care distributed across the wasteland transforms from investigation into invitation. The archivist gives the hat a small nod, as if acknowledging a colleague at shift change, then returns to what has become the daily liturgy of care. The radio receives its morning attention with methodical precision, frequencies scanned and logged by hand, in script that grows more careful with each entry. Each signal, strength noted like a pulse checked by someone who has learned to recognize the difference between healthy circulation and concerning irregularity. The 3-note motif appears on schedule, patient as sunrise, and the archivist hums along while recording its presence in the logbook that documents not mystery but method. Before the settlement fully wakes, the archivist makes a quiet circuit with tools that have become as natural to carry as coins or keys. At the clinic door, a hinge has developed the small complaint that speaks of metal learning to protest before it fails completely. A few drops of clean oil, the kind that smells of cedar and patient purpose, convince the hinge to remember how to behave properly. The squeak disappears into silence that feels like problem prevented rather than crisis solved. Small victory that announces itself through absence rather than presence. The nurse inside nods from her preparation station, no conversation required. A brief entry appears in the clinic's maintenance ledger. Hinge seen to, squeak steadied, latch aligned for small hands. MS. The letters are written in the archivist's ordinary script, which is to say, identically to the others, yet particular to this moment. This choice to step forward with assistance when assistance is needed. A kettle, cleaned and filled at the pump that someone keeps in good repair, finds its way to where the night watch has been maintaining vigil through the small hours when the world feels largest and most empty. Steam rises like incense in the pre-dawn air, while two people share warmth without needing to share conversation, company offered and accepted in the comfortable silence that belongs to those who understand that presence itself can be gift enough. The watch accepts the cup with gratitude that needs no words. The archivist nods acknowledgement, and both return to their watching with renewed attention to what needs tending. From the diner's back steps, the three notes drift at even intervals, not as claim to territory, but as reassurance offered to anyone who might be listening. The way lighthouse keepers tend their lamps not for their own navigation, but for vessels they may never see. The sound carries across desert air with unhurried persistence, joining the larger conversation that connects distant watchers through shared understanding of what the work requires. In the distance, other notes answer with voices that are ragged but present. A harmonica from the direction of the water tower, slightly flat but earnest. Whistling from somewhere near the trading post, clear and true. A radio signal that carries the familiar phrase before dissolving back into static. Each response adds its voice to a constellation of small signals that say, someone is awake, someone is watching, someone cares enough to maintain contact across the spaces that might otherwise feel empty. By mid-morning, the practice spreads not through dramatic announcement, but through quiet example. A Minutemen captain arrives with a request for copies of the vantage points documented in the investigation. Locations where watchers can maintain presence without intrusion, where help can be offered without strings attached. The captain accepts the carefully drawn maps with the understanding of someone who recognizes useful intelligence when it appears, asking no questions about sources, requiring no explanations about methods. The captain observes while studying the marked locations. The copies disappear into official channels, where they will become part of patrol routes and safety protocols. The practice spreading in daylight, not as rumor requiring belief, but as neighborliness with structure, care with method, watching that serves rather than surveils. The tailor's influence ripples outward without the tailor needing to be present. A child arrives carrying a small parcel from Freeside. The quiet bin's contents replenished for this side of the Mojave. Inside, gloves carefully cleaned and mended, a hat with faint scent of sage that asks nothing except to be understood, star-colored thread, and 3 notes written in different hands but bearing the same message. The archivist adds these to the collection beside the counter, where tools wait to be taken and returned, understanding that circulation is itself a form of care. The afternoon brings the work of documentation, not the chronicling of mystery, but the sharing of method. The archivist begins a primer on clean paper, the tone as unadorned as the work it describes. The opening line serves as both title and invitation. What follows reads not like instruction manual, but like conversation with a trusted friend. The guidelines continue with gentle specificity. As afternoon lengthens toward evening, small demonstrations of the practice occur without being staged. A young couple argues quietly in a booth, the visible kind of worry that comes when 2 good plans both want to be primary. The archivist does not approach or interfere. They simply place a clean coaster between the cups and wipe the counter in a slow circle visible to peripheral vision. The couple reach for the same coaster simultaneously, and pause long enough to laugh at their coordination. When conversation resumes, it has lowered itself into something truer, more generous. A trader stops by with a question about preventing latches from freezing during cold snaps. An older guard shares wisdom learned during harder winters, demonstration taking the place of lecture, hands showing what words might complicate. A child stands on tiptoe to observe, committing the motion to memory. Someone leaves a coin on the windowsill, not the spending kind, but the circulating kind. Someone else pockets it, understanding it will travel until the next small need allows its meaning to be passed along. Evening gathers with the oldest, rhythm of all, light surrendering to darkness, not through defeat, but through natural progression. Day completing its responsibilities and passing watch to night. Lamps are set low throughout the settlement, windows becoming beacons that say someone is home, someone is awake. Someone maintains vigil over spaces where people rest and prepare for tomorrow's possibilities. The three-note motif drifts from the radio on the hour, gentle reminder that the network continues its patient circulation. The archivist hums along, adding their voice to the larger song that says, "Someone is listening, someone cares. You are not alone in the watching." From the back step, the notes lift into deepening blue and return on softer tide. Between them, the air holds quiet that comes when a day's work has been enough. The archivist completes final entries with the same calm hand that opened the day. Frequencies logged, maintenance noted, small acts of care documented not as exceptional service, but as matter of course. They place copies of the primer where they can be found by those who might need them, understanding that the best instructions are invitations rather than commands. The hat receives another respectful nod, not from superstition, but from recognition due to tools that stay ready. The kettle is cleaned and prepared for whoever might need warmth in the small hours. The radio maintains its patient broadcast, while the green eye blinks with mechanical faithfulness. Frequencies carrying voices that transform empty air into company for those who listen. Outside, the world settles into night with the particular peace that comes from being tended by many hands, watched over by many eyes, held in care by a tradition that honors both helper and helped. The practice continues not through central organization, but through individual choice to participate in work that is always available, to hands willing to be guided by its simple principles. The story approaches its natural conclusion, not through dramatic revelation, but through recognition that the most important work happens in cycles, morning checks and evening notes, daily attention to small details that prevent large failures, patient circulation of care that connects communities across distances that might otherwise isolate them. The hinge toward what comes next feels familiar and good. Lamps lowered to embers, chairs arranged without scraping, a last look at the hat, the coin, the map. Objects arranged not as relics, but as readiness for tomorrow's opportunities to see what needs steadying and step forward with whatever tools happen to be at hand. The evening settles around this understanding, like a comfortable coat, and the world prepares for rest in knowledge that it is tended, not by mysterious strangers, but by neighbors who have learned that the work of care is always available, always necessary, always sufficient when carried forward by hands that understand its weight and its grace. Night settles with a soft hand across the wasteland, drawing darkness around the diner, like a familiar blanket that has learned the contours of what it covers. The building becomes a small island of glow in the vast ocean of desert evening, its windows casting amber light that speaks not of defiance against the darkness, but of patient company, offered to anyone who might need to know that someone somewhere, remains awake and attentive to the world's quiet needs. Inside, the accumulated day rests with the satisfaction of work completed without fanfare. The radio's green eye has dimmed to half-lidded watchfulness, still blinking but more slowly now, like someone settling into comfortable drowse while maintaining just enough awareness to respond if needed. The map lies flat across the counter, its pins and annotations telling stories of care distributed across distances that connect rather than separate, evidence of a network that functions through trust rather than oversight. The hat maintains its vigil on the wooden peg, silhouette cast against the wall like a quiet sentinel that asks nothing except to be ready when readiness is required. Beside it, the star coin catches the last direct light from the lamp, its small surface reflecting warmth back into the room without keeping any for itself. These objects have transformed through the investigation from mysterious artifacts into familiar tools, their significance lying not in what they conceal, but in what they reveal about the patient architecture of care that holds communities together. The archivist closes the ledger with gentle finality, pages settling against each other with the soft whisper of paper that has received its due attention. Each entry documented with care, frequencies logged, maintenance noted, small acts of kindness recorded not as exceptional service but as matter of course. The star coin finds its place atop the closed cover, serving simultaneously as paperweight and promise kept, small weight that holds larger understanding in place, ready for whoever might need to consult this documentation in seasons yet to come. Outside, the three-note phrase drifts from the radio's speaker and dissolves into the evening's larger symphony, crickets maintaining their ancient percussion, wind moving through corrugated metal, with the patience of something that knows how to make music from obstacles. The distant hum of generators kept in repair by hands that understand the value of reliable power. The electronic signal becomes part of this organic chorus, human artifice finding its place in natural rhythm without disrupting the larger harmony. A pale moth, drawn by the lamp's gentle glow, touches the shade briefly, then settles on a cooler patch of wall where its small life can proceed without fuss. Somewhere in the distance, a dog shifts and gives a single, satisfied huff before returning to sleep. These small movements speak of a world at ease with itself, tended by hands that understand the difference between watching over and watching for. The opening tableau returns with the circular satisfaction of stories that know their proper shape. Glass counters filmed with desert dust fine as silk, lamplight casting everything in amber tones that make the ordinary seem touched by something approaching sacred and threading through it all. The persistent sense that at the edge of the frame, someone decent is looking out for someone else. What began as investigation has become recognition. What started as search for answers has transformed into invitation to participate. The diner breathes like an animal that has found the right temperature for rest, corners rounding into the kind of darkness that does not hide so much as soften. The familiar arrangement speaks of completion without finality. The kettle cleaned and ready for tomorrow's first cup, chairs positioned without scraping. The maintenance kit returned to its proper drawer, where tools wait with patient dignity. The reframing resolution lands without insistence, settling into understanding the way sediment finds its level in still water. The mysterious stranger is revealed as practice communities keep rather than person they worship. Kindness. You can join without asking permission, rather than legend you must believe to benefit from. It is role that fits as many people as choose to wear it. Tradition that grows stronger through distribution rather than weaker through division. The evidence speaks clearly now. Different scents, varied handwriting, subtle variations in tokens. These tell not of inconsistency requiring explanation, but of consistency that embraces individual expression while maintaining essential character. The work adapts to local needs, different temperaments, different ways of moving through the world, while preserving the core understanding that small interventions prevent large crises, that presence at the periphery can be more valuable than center stage. If you are awake in the small hours when the world feels largest and most empty, there is time to breathe, time to notice what needs attention, time to step forward with whatever tools you happen to carry. If you are tired from carrying responsibilities that feel too heavy for one person to bear alone, you may rest in the knowledge that others are near enough to tend the small things that need tending, that the work continues in hands that have learned to hold it lightly while bearing it faithfully toward whatever need might arise. The understanding earned through investigation carries with it a gentle weight of responsibility, not burden, but invitation to join work that is always available to hands willing to be guided by its simple principles. The revelation removes pressure while adding purpose, transforms impossible expectation of individual heroism into sustainable practice of distributed care. If you hear the three notes tomorrow, whether from radio frequencies, harmonica breath, or whistling that carries on, desert wind, let them mean safety rather than suspense, comfort rather than mystery requiring solution. Let them guide you to steady someone's wheel and then step back, to oil a hinge before it squeaks loud enough to wake sleepers, to add your own quiet signal to the constellation of care that spans the wasteland like groundwater, unseen until it surfaces as assistance, then hidden again as it continues its essential circulation. The practice asks nothing except willingness to see what needs steadying and step forward with competence tempered by humility. No special skills required, no formal training necessary, only the understanding that small kindnesses multiply when shared, that watching over others is how we watch over ourselves, that the stranger you help today may be the one who helps you tomorrow. The credits of a world with many hands roll silently through the evening air, no names announced, no recognition claimed, only the quiet satisfaction that comes from work done well, by people who understand that the most important contributions often happen when no one is keeping score. The tailor's careful seams, the guard's patient watch, the scribe's second cup cooling at an open window, the child's drawing that teaches strangers to feel steadier for reasons they cannot name. The lamp receives its evening attention, wick trimmed to burn cleanly through the night, a gentle beacon that says someone is home. Someone maintains vigil over spaces where people rest and prepare for tomorrow's possibilities. The flame settles to steady glow, ready to provide light for anyone who might need to find their way in the darkness without stumbling over obstacles that careful attention could prevent. The tape recorder clicks to silence with mechanical satisfaction of equipment that has served its purpose well. The investigation is complete, its findings preserved not as conclusion, but as invitation, not as ending, but as beginning, for those ready to understand that the work of care is always available, always necessary, always sufficient when carried forward by hands that have learned its weight and its grace. The room allows sleep to settle like dust on glass, gentle and complete, natural as the progression from day to night, inevitable as the tide that carries rest to those who have earned it, through attention paid to what needed tending. The diner holds this peace with the dignity of places that serve as waypoints rather than destinations, where understanding can be found by those who seek it with patience, rather than demanding it through urgency. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to see what needs steadying, new chances to step forward with assistance that asks nothing except to be received with grace. But tonight brings the comfort of knowing that the work continues in hands that have learned to carry it forward, not as burden, but as privilege, not as duty imposed from outside, but as choice made from understanding that the world grows quieter and safer when tended by many people working in gentle coordination, each adding their small light to the larger illumination that keeps the darkness from feeling quite so empty, quite so alone.